Hello and welcome to
Debrief.
This is episode 1 where we are going to have an analysis on Realm Exalt. So hi, I'm CW Girl, also known as Sammy. We have Refical, YinYarn, and Talwar. I want to say special thanks to all of our patrons. You guys keep the podcast going, despite us being dead as hell. Anyways, let's start.
The Exalt supporter campaign got released recently. How have your experiences been on the client so far?
Not too different from regular Realm in terms of like DCs. I know everybody's saying that they're getting kicked out of dungeons, and that does happen, but performance-wise, it's about as smooth since I didn't really experience too many lag issues beforehand on Flash. But aside from the new perspective being full screen and the occasional crashing whenever you're loading into like Oryx and stuff, it's a pretty smooth one, all things considered. It's beta, so I'm not expecting something super polished, but it's a little bit better than expected. I think it's good. It's good. Needs work, and it's fine. It's only going to get better from here, so I got used to it pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, I say the only like main issue I have with it is like the fog of war, because I feel like I'm about to have an epileptic seizure whenever I see it, but other than that, it's like not nearly as buggy as I thought, aside from crashing, which, you know, I experienced a bunch, but I'm sure they'll smooth it out.
Yeah, Fog of War is something that I'm glad other people are mentioning too, because I was worried I was in the minority of that, so it might actually get changed, which is good, because that's the one thing that just looks choppy. And people are saying that they're doing that because they don't want to give Exalt players a vision advantage over people who are still on Flash, but it's probably also because they haven't done it yet. I doubt that they've coded it, because that's the old perspective. They're going to have to widen it out completely, which they'd have to change the way that the game renders. They just have to expand it. So they probably just haven't gotten to it yet.
I feel they could use something like, the Fog of War in Dota, where it's just like a constant, basically like a PNG of fog around you. They could just do something like that. It would just look a lot smoother, maybe if it's even temporary for the beta.
Yeah, just something smooth.
We actually did a recent interview with Miniguy, and his word on the random disconnects was that it may be a foundational issue with the game. He's had a pretty good look at how Realm of the Mad Gods client works, because, you know, he made his own client out of it.
Yeah.
What changes would you guys make to the current client?
Let's see, changes, because there's the technical side and then there's the design side. Obviously, I would like all disconnecting, lag, dumb Golden Sphinx teleport deaths to be gone. Yes.
That's on Flash too, friend.
That's where, yes. That's what I'm saying. I would like all of that stuff to get. That's like the biggest thing. Bots, try and get rid of that. I know we'll address that later, but design-wise, you were asking like what I wanted to see implemented, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're already planning Oryx 3, which was a big one I wanted to see. I'm glad that that's coming in the works. That's pretty cool. And then with that, there's going to come Tier 7 abilities, Tier 14 weapons. I always forget. I mix up because armors are one tier above ahead of weapons. But as far as a major mechanic goes, I'm not really sure how much further we can take it without just readjusting. I'd like to see a rework go to pets in general, just change a little bit how they operate, because obviously I can't ask them to get rid of it. And I even did a poll on my channel, not that that's accurate to the whole realm's opinion, the whole community's opinion, but it was like 70% say that they like the game better with pets, so I accept that I may be in the minority when it comes to that argument, but I think definitely a rework is in order, just to scale the healing somehow, or make vitality mod, maybe do something with that at the very least. Just something to improve the overall balance, so that way early and late game, new player and experienced player isn't like an ocean apart.
They did have the combat tag mechanic, when was it? Like something a few months ago on the beta, they added that combat tag mechanic.
Oh, no, I was thinking of the Challenger campaign.
Yeah, so the combat tag mechanic was one where if you were hit for a bullet, I think it did about 35 or more damage, you would be combat tagged for 7 seconds, and your pet would heal 1/5 as much. until you got out of combat. And I thought it was a really good mechanic, but
when the heck
really
did that
didn't
happen?
like it. It was in one of the betas, if I recall.
When Jesus descended back to Earth and decided to fix the game.
One of the betas? Wait, like on testing? Or you mean Exalt?
Yeah, one of the testing. Not on Exalt, but on the
just
testing
regular
client.
Just regular testing server, okay. I must have been like not doing much at that time. I don't even remember that.
Why am I the only one that remembers that?
I didn't hear anything about that.
Yeah, the Hellspawn set our own players decided to hiss and groan at changes that were good.
They were really upset in the Tide Army Discord, specifically. There were a lot of players that were really disgruntled by the change, and they didn't want to see it go to prod, so I guess that was a majority of the outcry from the general community. So they said, no, we don't want this.
Wait, did you even get to answer the last one, Yin?
No, well, but how could I? I didn't play play Exalt.
Well, you can still... You could still dream, can't you?
Game looks very crisp and clear.
No, the one where it's like, what do you want to see?
Holy.
The changes to the game. It's like just like, what do you want to see changed in the game?
So first off, I wanted to say I have to be quiet because I've got a buddy sleeping next to me. But what I want to see changed is that we take Realm, we make it a MOBA. I want to see more people getting toxic towards each other and yelling at each other more often than they already do. I think that spice things up a little bit.
We should take Realm and push it somewhere else.
In all seriousness, I think the game itself is kind of in a fine spot. I think there should be some changes. Like, I feel like some dungeons, to put an example, things like Abyss of Demons, UDL, all that stuff get completely demolished by players nowadays. The only way that it's a challenge now is if someone is completely new to the game and they don't know any better. I think they could really use some spicing up to make those pots worth something again. I think current events probably drop a little too many pots. I was able to 8 like 5 or 6 characters alone from this alien event. It's one of those things where it's like, it's great that I have all these characters now, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it was that much of a challenge. I think there just needs to be some more. Maybe that's just because I've played the game for so long, but I'm not even that great at the game. I just think that there needs to be a bit more implementation of making things more of a challenge now. And especially since I'm the kind of player that likes to always have the hardest possible thing put on me.
True.
But the problem is, a lot of the times in this game, if you're not being careful, you can lose a ton of work in a small amount of time. It's not like you can just reset, so it's a little different, but I think if there's a ton of people present, maybe not if you're soloing, but if there's like 65 people, there should definitely be some harder challenge than just HP buffing. I think there could be more.
In a previous discussion with Miniguy, as well as a word from Red Blob, who is a consultant for Wild Shadow, they both defined one-shot mechanics like the Ice Sphere and the Golden Sphinx as inflated difficulty, or rather Red Blob did. And Miniguy himself actually called it a learning cliff, in which you know what it is, and you won't die to it, or you don't know what it is, and you will die to it, which I don't feel is very fair to new players, because they don't see an Ice Sphere and they go like, oh, that thing's going to one-shot me and charge me.
Yeah, that sort of thing is almost inevitable, because you don't know what anything does in this game unless you either hear it from someone, look at a guide, or take the damage. Because there's really no way to learn how much damage an enemy does without outside resources in-game, without getting hit. So that's just sort of the inherent problem with that. I don't even know how to solve that. In regards to the one-shotting, yeah, you could definitely scale those back. I don't necessarily think that they're always unfair. Like you were saying, if it's a higher-end dungeon like the Shatters, it's an Ice Sphere. He sits there, he has this tsunami of attacks coming out of him. You don't want to get close to that, and he charges you, you can back up. But even something like Gray Blobs, they should not be as destructive to new players as they are.
Yep, there goes my NPE.
I don't know if they still are like that. Probably, I mean, it's an old enemy, so they probably haven't changed it, but stuff like that, where it does fly on screen and does a ton of damage, yeah, I definitely think those could be even cut in half, or given like a period of cooldown of attacks, where they just shoot half as much and then wait. Getting sat on by an enemy was always just something that you expected after a certain point. It's like, oh, don't sit on that, or he's going to try and sit on you. But with newer things like the Draconis, yeah, and I remember you pointing this out to me, that a lot of bosses, whenever they get close to you, they back up instead of sitting directly on top of you.
Not green though. For some reason, not green. I don't know why.
Green doesn't back up. Does he ever get close enough to like?
Yes, he's backed us up into a corner multiple times.
Okay.
He does. Unfortunately,
Blue doesn't,
they
though.
need to fix that.
And I don't think Wyvern does either.
Maybe,
is it just one enemy? Wyvern. Did I find the one enemy that does? Never mind.
Ivory Wyvern has like a distance, and he can't like enter a certain vicinity of players. He'll only like get really close to you, close enough that he could kill you, but not close enough that he'll one-shot you.
Yeah, I don't think he'll sit on you.
Yeah.
I don't think that green will sit on you necessarily either, but they'll get close enough to where it feels uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, you don't want to be able to just go into a corner and be safe either. There has to be a middle ground there. But yeah, an enemy that just runs over top of you, that's always a little bit. But sometimes that is, well, Zolotl has the phase change problem. That's really it. But I'm okay with enemies that are have very high damage that run towards you. But stuff like Painlings running through the wall and insta-popping you because you can't see them because of how enemies render, that's a little frustrating. Just because also they explode like half a tile in front of their body. That seems more like a glitch than anything, but yeah, insta-pop enemies could be certainly toned down. I don't think it necessarily adds much. It's more just a scare tactic. Sometimes it works to the game's favor of a really high-end dungeon being even scarier than it already is. Crusade is essentially, if you get close enough, can be a one-shot, and that was what made it so formidable. But
yeah,
but that's a closer range enemy. It has a spread of attacks. It's not like he's gonna sit on you like a bomb.
He can be slowed too, which is pretty fair.
Yeah. So there are workarounds here.
He walks slow enough to where even though he's one of those enemies that can definitely one-shot you, you have to be really careless for that to happen.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. A lot of enemies are like that, but yeah, it's the hardest thing, achieving something when you have this many players, to be hard without being unfair, and then you don't want it to be too easy. You want people to participate, but you don't want it to be too complicated. I certainly wouldn't know the first thing to do in designing like a dungeon or a new boss, or it would be a difficult task.
Do either of you have any new projects coming up that you would be willing to drop?
I am just working on regular stuff. It's nothing in particular. I mean, April Fool's is coming up, so there will be something for that. Hopefully. I mean, geez, hate to break a promise, but yeah, regular stuff. Might do the normal guides for any loose ends that I have, occasional commentaries. I kind of like what I'm doing with the This Item Needs Buffed series or whatever. Maybe that'll be a series, I don't know. Reviewing indie games that I'm playing and just miscellaneous stuff. So nothing in particular. It's really just a list of things I feel like doing that day, and let's work on that right now. So more of the same in a sense. What about you, Yin?
Yeah, I can talk about that. Do you mind if I talk about the fairness of the game for 1 second?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Just to kind of, I mean, you guys kind of cleared it up quite a bit, but there was something I was going to relate it to. Like, whenever I think of things like learning curves, like, because you guys were talking about how new players, something like an ice sphere will come out and they don't see it, they get popped, they learn from it, right? It's like, I kind of put that akin to something like an old platformer, where if you don't know that there's a platform because of something, like, it's about as unfair as like a blind jump, where you don't know that something is underneath you, but until you play the game enough, you know it's underneath you. I kind of put that in the same league, where it's not fair. Once you know it, it's justifiable, but it's still not a very fair mechanic. I think that they still need to fix things like that. I don't think an ice sphere should be as fast as it is. I think things like the Golden Sphinx, things that can just jump on top of you and teleport instantly and kill you if you just happen to be in the wrong spot, is not fair. Of course, things like that. I mean, I don't know if that's a client issue, but when you see people dying to things like that, you know that it's an issue. It should probably be fixed. Another thing that I have a problem with is things that are not really counterable. Things like paralyze, things like darkness. There are probably more I can think of. Things like weaken, that Weaken seems fine on paper, but when you think about Weaken, what does it really do? All it does is stall out a fight. Voice correct. It stalls out a fight. So it ends up not being really something to avoid. It just ends up being something that just makes the fight longer than it needs to be.
Unstable.
Yeah, unstable's in the same category. But things like Paralyze, there is no counter to Paralyze. The only thing that you can do with Paralyze is either pray that there is a Puri Priest next to you or you carry Holy Water. But manners are far and in between. So it's not really a valid option. Something like Darkness is sort of in the same category. You can roll around Darkness a little bit more, but if you didn't know where things were, or if you're walking around, then you can still die. And if you walk around in Darkness, you have the chance of dying. If you stand still in Darkness, you still have the chance of dying. It's not a very fun mechanic because you don't know where things are. If you could have a hint of where things are, it would be more fair, but you don't.
Yeah, so, maybe if you like saw the shadows of enemies moving around.
Yeah, if you saw something darkness, moving around.
Which could be done with Unity, probably.
Right. But currently things like Paralyze and Darkness are very, either you have someone with you or you don't and you Nexus. If you can't tank it, is what it comes down to. So I think things like that should probably be looked at and possibly changed in the future.
How would you feel about a point that some people make that some uncontrollable aspects of Realm are sort of part of the game and like death is part of the game and that's how you sort of get better or improve your characters and whatnot? Like how would you feel about that versus like what you just said?
Yes, I agree that death is part of the game. I mean, that's the whole reason people even played to begin with. If there was no risk, we wouldn't have an adrenaline rush. It's just one of those things that makes the game enjoyable. But I still think that despite there needing to be a difficulty curve, I think that every difficulty curve, despite what difficulty it is, it should still be very learnable, and you should still be able to learn from it while still not losing a character. So, you know, something like, even just to put it in perspective, something like even Zalotl, as was mentioned before, if a new player will not know that he is going to just go back to the center and instantly start shooting again. And the way that Zalotl moves around in a circle around the center, and there's paralyzing shots on the outer field, you immediately center around the center because that's the safest spot. So as soon as he comes back around and you're not prepared for it, that's just something that you didn't know. You know, so I think that dying to ignorance is a bad thing. I think that they should make everything telegraphed, you know, to the point to where it's still hard to dodge. If you can still see bullets coming and have a hard time dodging them, but as long as you know it's coming, I think it's fair. If you don't, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that in any game, this goes for anything, you always want damage and deaths to be fair. In regards to telegraphing, sometimes there are cases where it's almost impossible to telegraph a certain kind of attack, but in this game, since it's all about bullets flying out of a character, you can almost always figure it out. And with this move to the new client, we'll be able to have more visual indicators. Even something like the ice sphere, charging players way too quickly, you could add... Is my voice cracking? I can't even tell anymore.
No,
it happens so much. Even something with the ice sphere, you can give it an effect of like charging, and maybe even include like an after image, or I guess in this case a before image of where it's going to go, and then you can move out of the way. Anything that's too fast like that should usually have a little look out, like even just an exclamation point, something to let you know.
And usually other games do that. If something is going to be as drastic as a one-hit kill, there's usually a sign that it's coming, a big one.
And if they don't, it's usually a game where there's not permadeath.
Yeah,
you can restart and try again.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's not very fair.
Yeah, you have to be careful with that. Yeah, they're on their way. I mean, they've made a lot of good changes, so it's in the future, if not already, you know?
Yeah. I understand why they're doing it. I think that because of the way that pets are, almost the only way to die nowadays is from instant deaths. Not always. Sometimes things like void shots connecting and like 4 of them stack on top of you is like one of those few ways I can think of you dying without it being an instant death, but that's instant death is not a healthy way to go about the game. I think that they need to, despite players complaining, I think that nerfing pets in the long run would be healthier for the game.
What's interesting is that this whole telegraphing attacks and whatnot and making it more fair is almost the exact opposite of what happens in multiplayer games. Like online, if you think of like first-person shooters and all that, or even MOBAs to an extent, mainly the first-person stuff, you are almost expected to react to the unexpected. You just have to guess and intuit where other players are going to be, and there's no pattern, because they're humans. They aren't an AI being coded. It almost feels random. Yet, nobody complains about that, because it's a completely different, it's like a sport, anticipating the other team, like basketball players, like anticipating where the other players are going to go. It's all experience and intuition via more experience. It's a strange like separation, like why it's acceptable in games like that. But whenever it comes to something like this, we immediately hop on it, and it's like, no, we have to change that, because now suddenly we have control over it.
Because it's also permadeath too.
Yeah. Even if it wasn't permadeath, people would still complain about stupid stuff popping out of nowhere and being like, well, you should have known. No, I shouldn't have.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't make much sense to just be like, oh, okay, I guess that's how it goes.
I guess that's the advantage of programming something versus letting humans play your game and then having that be the enemy.
I think in competitive games, it's completely fair. I mean, it's human versus human, where you're like set against players of a similar skill set. Whereas in stuff like Realm of the Mad God, and people complain about this in Steambird's Alliance too, and they ended up removing permadeath from the game, which I think is a huge part of these, bullet hell RPG games. There's still a penalty, of course. I feel like Realm could do something similar, where they just add a penalty, but don't completely kill your character off. Like, maybe it resets its stats and fame, but you keep the items, or maybe you could keep one item at death. There's probably some workaround for it. I'm not a game developer or designer, I don't know. But I feel like there's a better way around permadeath, because it really doesn't feel great whenever you lose a character you've been putting like months into.
In the beginning, it is the worst feeling. When it's your only character, especially, or like your first one. That's why there's so much stocking up. It's like, okay, I'm not going to do anything really hard until I have 4 characters that are potted up. That is sort of a drawback to it. It makes you play way safer than you probably would otherwise, but at the same time, permadeath is what makes playing matter, holding on to those high-level items, because otherwise you'd always have them. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of the divide with that.
Alright, so next up, Revenge of the Fallen has plans to launch a standalone game. They want to get a game greenlit on Steam. They've been working on porting their game to a C# client, being Unity. They're writing their own client from scratch, redesigning the sprites that are owned by Deca, besides the one that are owned by Oryx Design, which they have a license for. Have you guys played P-servers before, and do you have an interest in the standalone game when it's released?
This standalone game is it going to be not against TOS anymore, I assume?
It's their own game. They're going to be out on their own, no ties to Deca whatsoever, and they can't be sued for anything because they don't own any of the code of the client, which was the original issue.
People can play it and not be against TOS as well.
Yeah, it would literally just be its own game.
Sweet.
So they're coding everything from scratch and redoing all the sprites.
Well, hey, good for them. That's great. I might, yeah, I mean, in that case, is it still, sorry, did you say it was still going to be web-based, or is it going to Steam, or?
Actually, it's going to be like a Unity for Realm of the Mad God. It'll have its own client in Unity. You download the client, you can play on it. There's not like a lot of retrieval. Everything's like in the client already, so you don't have to like use an SVG file or like pull from Realm.
Interesting.
It'll basically just be a game.
Right, yeah. Well, I'm curious to see how that turns out, if it's gonna like look way different, or with all the new sprites and whatnot. Aside from the ones that, yeah, like you said, weren't already owned. I'll probably check it out at some point, yeah. At the very least, look into it. When's it set to go for? Do they know? Or is it just in the works?
It'll be fairly recent. I'd say between now and a few months.
Cool, okay.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So, this has been a prominent issue for a very long time. It's nothing really new, but I wanted to discuss it today. Recently, YinYarn experienced it, and it was the whenever your client lags, sometimes the server will argue that the bullets hit, and it'll kill your character regardless of what you see on the screen, because of the way that client-to-server interactions happen. The reason being because it's so easy on the Flash client to just tell the client, like, hey, I'm not being hit by these bullets, and that's how God mode hacks work. And so, in response, Deca said, we're going to have the server handle them, and the client will handle them at the same time, but if our server says something different, your character's dead. That would be the Grand Sphinx that killed you earlier, Yin.
So wait, are they saying they're not entirely going to fix it?
Well, there's not really a word on it, but I wanted to discuss the topic at hand and see what your opinion is on it.
Which aspect of it?
That servers handle bullet registry and take precedence over the client. So even if you lag and it's not your fault, sometimes your character can just die.
Even if it didn't hit you, it did.
Yeah, even if it
ya.
didn't hit you, even if your client crashes, same thing happens. If you were hit by enough bullets in the time that it took you to close the game, it'll just kill your character.
I feel like that happens anyway. Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to die to stuff that doesn't exist yet. If there was a way to fix that, I'm sure they would look into it. It sounds like almost like it might be impossible with their current resources. I don't know. If the stuff hasn't loaded in yet for you, but it has for the game, then that sounds like an optimization issue that should be worked on and addressed. If it's really bad, if it's like a 1%, then it might be something we can overlook for now while it's still in beta, but definitely when this thing goes live, I feel like that stuff should be a thing of the past. If you got decent internet and a good computer, especially, like...
In a recent discussion with Miniguy, we talked about bullet registry, and he presented a workaround that RotF uses, and I can't recall it exactly, but there are other ways to work around it. It's just, in this kind of climate, Deca really likes putting Band-Aid fixes on everything, and just saying, oh, we'll fix that later, and they never do. The same thing of why, people have gotten used to it, but you can't move stuff in your inventory when you're in your pet yard.
Yeah, or the daily quest.
Or the daily quest room.
Yeah, peculiar. But backpack trading's coming. Woo! It's something. But yeah, that was Band-Aid solution to fix duping or something like that.
Yeah, there's some type of duping method whenever you fed it to your pet, but then you didn't really, and something about moving your inventory. I don't know the logistics because I didn't play at the time.
It's going to be 2030 and duping will still be around somehow.
On that note, actually, Deca has partnered with a new company, and they're introducing a method called blockchaining, which is, if you boil it down, it's applying a numerical ID to each item in a really complex fashion, and it's what they're doing to prevent duping and market manipulation, because you can see there's so many life pots that... So you can see on the market, things such as life pots have started declining in value, or just potions in general. RWT sites are at an all-time high. If you didn't know, by the way, a Deca ring on an RWT site costs on average 60 cents.
Wow.
That's how bad duping is right now.
Dude, freaking duping.
Yeah, it's always been a problem in Realm.
They can't fix it.
Every time they fix it, it just comes back. And nobody knows how to fix it, ever.
I remember when I first introduced one of my IRL friends to Realm, I came back to him playing an hour later, and he bought a character and had 2 vaults of Deca rings, along with other crap armor. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I got messages in the Nexus about it to buy some, so I did. Oh my god.
What?
Dude.
What kind of a lemming is he?
I didn't think new people actually fell for that, just because I'm not that type of person, but I can see how people would fall for stuff like that.
Yeah, I never thought that people would actually go out and be like, haha, let me buy some whatever.
The first thing. Not even a desperation move, I need it. This is... He thought he was doing the right thing.
It's you're so new to the game, you don't even know if this is really that good or bad. Why would you... Why? Just why?
That's a don't talk to strangers lesson.
It's like when Yin buys skins for Broodmother that cost $30.
He did?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
How much did it cost? You bought some cosmetics for Dota when we played it the first time?
It was worth every penny.
I didn't realize he liked it so much. It's more money than I spent. I got like 700 hours.
Yeah, he didn't. He played like 3 games.
She is my mother now.
Mother comes.
Dear God.
Listen, if I have to spend $30 on a sexy spider, I am going to do it. There's no
I can't argue with the facts.
I'm not editing that out.
Nothing else comes close.
Yo, sexy spiders? Widowmaker?
Spider.
No. Also, definitely not Elise from League of Legends. I hate humanoid spiders. I need the 8 legs or it's nothing, baby. All raw, no rubber.
One for each leg.
Mm-hmm.
Dear God.
All right. We got to leave the podcast, R18 now.
That's true. You're... You are. You definitely don't have arachnophobia.
Alright, thank you to our Patreons MG Oryx and Adam Shogun for supporting us, even now. If you would like to email us with inquiries, our email is winecellarrotmgpodcast@gmail.com. We want to give a shout out to DJ Quad, who produced our intro and outro music, and one final thank you to our guests for coming on today.
I'll see you guys later.
I'll see you guys later.
You shut your mouth. Told you he was a Titan.